There will never be peace in the Middle East when Israel doesn't want it.
Okay, that claim is frankly absurd. The notion that Israel, even if it was the bad guy in the Israel-Palestinian dispute, is somehow responsible for the numerous crises throughout the Middle East is just ridiculous. I challenge Ryan to demonstrate how Israel is in any way meaningfully responsible for the appalling conditions in Saudi Arabia, the destruction of Iraq, the Iran-Iraq war, the genocide and ethnic cleansing of the Kurds, or situations in places near the Middle East which are related to the Middle East, such as Afghanistan and North Africa, particularly Sudan. To suggest that Israel is somehow responsible for the crises of the Middle East is utterly ridiculous, and it's amazing that anyone even bothers trying to make that claim.
You cannot possibly think about peace when one side is building racial colonies. It is impossible.
Even if one accepts the distorted picture of the realities of the Middle East that Ryan has just portrayed, and which I've already partially addressed, it is impossible to think about peace while various regimes, including the various Palestinian authorities, such as Hamas and Fatah, continue to bombard their populations with the most vicious hate propaganda. Or is Ryan completely ignorant of the existence of this propaganda? Because it certainly is real.
This can't happen anywhere else in the world. The excuse for the Jews to do this is the Holocaust.
Another myth conception, and a popularly believed one. It is, however, an absurdity to believe that the Israelis use the Holocaust as an excuse or even an explanation for any policies they are currently enacting. I challenge Ryan to find any evidence that the Holocaust is used as an excuse or explanation by Israelis in any meaningful sense of the word. And by that I don't mean some obscure rabbi, I mean official documents or something of that nature. Furthermore, the Zionist movement started long before the Holocaust even happened. And when the Zionists first moved to what was then a province of the Ottoman Empire called Palestine, they bought land. They didn't steal it. They bought land at extremely exorbitant prices from Arab landholders who were willing to sell it to them. It is certainly true that the realisation of the horrors of the Nazi final solution resulted in significant sympathy for the Jewish people around the world. This, however, should not be conflated with US and British establishment policy. In 1948, the United States did tentatively agree, after the Soviet Union beat them to it, to the formation of a Jewish state. However, when the Arab states attacked, the United States reversed its recognition and, along with Britain, slapped an arms embargo on the Israeli Jews. And furthermore, Britain, and to an extent the US establishment, aided the Arab armies. This resulted in a massive protest, pictures of which you're seeing here, where at least 100,000, and some say more like 200,000, American workers from around the country descended on New York to protest against this policy.
Apparently, Palestinians of this generation have to pay for the sins of the Germans, Nazi Germans.
Ironically, I actually agree with that assertion, but for very different reasons than Ryan, I would suspect. Has Ryan heard of Haji al-Husseini, and does he know who this man was and what he was about? Probably not. Very few Palestine solidarity activists have. And for that matter, even many pro-Israel activists don't really seem to know much about him. No one with any interest in this conflict, with solving it anyway, should go without knowing exactly who this man was and what he was about. So I'm going to introduce you to him. Haji al-Husseini, also known as the Mufti of Jerusalem, was appointed to that position by the British Empire who every time he organised a riot against the Jews in what was then British Mandate Palestine was rewarded with increasing amounts of power. In around 1941, he, along with Saddam Hussein's uncle among others, organised a pro-Nazi coup in Iraq, and there was a Nazi regime in Iraq for approximately a year. This was defeated by the British, but he then fled to Tehran, in Iran of course, and from there to Mussolini's Italy, and there to Berlin, where he met with Adolf Hitler, who put him in charge of the Waffen-SS division in Bosnia, the descendants of which helped trigger the Balkans Wars in the 1990s, primarily targeting the Bosnian Serbs. What is not so well known about this man is that he was co-architect of the Nazi final solution along with Adolf Eichmann. I say that again, he was co-architect of the Nazi final solution. At the end of the war, Yugoslavia went to try him, but he mysteriously escaped and popped up in Egypt, where he became mentor to none other than Yasser Arafat and the current president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas. This man was no simple Nazi puppet. He was a senior Nazi, and he is also the father of what could be called the Palestinian movement. That's right, the Palestinian movement is a fascist movement. A real question for Israeli patriots should be, why is it that a few independent researchers are the ones exposing this? Why isn't the Israeli government exposing this? After all, these facts are not entirely unwell known to those who study these things. The protesters, as I showed you in previous pictures, knew exactly who this man was.
The American media's obvious bias and non-coverage of the occupation of Palestine should be stunning.
Actually, what's stunning is how much coverage they do give it. Well, it's been quite a long time since I've even bothered watching the nightly news services. It's propaganda after all. In the days when I did, barely a week, and at times a day, would go past without reports coming out from the Arab-Israeli conflict. A friend of mine in America tells me it's much the same way over there. Why, if the Western media is so pro-Israel, and if Israel is doing all the horrendous things which Ryan and many others seem to think it is, do they give it any coverage at all? Or why don't they just give it occasional scant coverage, like they do the genocide in Sudan, or numerous other conflicts around the world that essentially get ignored? That's not to say that the Western media is pro-Arab either. It obviously isn't. But to suggest that it's pro-Israel is absurd. Well, there we have it, Ryan. I've addressed your assertions and effectively answered your questions, I think, your implied questions. There's loads of links for you to study in the description column. Care to engage in a debate, which I hope will be a constructive one. Bear in mind that the establishment, the globalist criminal syndicate, the New World Order, whatever one wishes to call it, spares very little expense in ensuring that warriors are busy fighting irrelevant battles, attacking irrelevant people, and hacking each other to bits. Also bear in mind that the two of us live in the relative safety of America and Australia. Neither of us are in any immediate danger of being blown up by Palestinian suicide bombers, or being hit by Israeli missile fire, or helicopter gunships. It seems to me, therefore, that we have a responsibility, if we're going to talk about this conflict, where these humans are fighting each other, that we have a responsibility to try and get our facts right, and to correct ourselves and correct each other when we get things wrong. So, care to step onto my mat? I'm only a white belt, and a pretty badly out of practice one at that. You should be able to sweep my ass without even breaking a sweat. Care to see if you can pass my guard? Either way, I hope you've learned something from this, and I hope other viewers learn something from this as well. We'll see what happens. Catch us later.